Today, 25th of March, 2022, is, according to the Gaudiya Vaishnava calendar, the anniversary of the appearance of Srivasa Pandita. And on this occasion, I'm going to speak about the disappearance of Srivasa Pandita, or Srivasa Pandita, who disappeared recently. Srivasa Pandita, whose appearance is celebrated today, is, of course, one of the members of the Panchatattva. Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Srivasa Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. So Srivasa is mentioned as the principal among the Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda, among the unlimited numbers of Vaishnavas at the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's one of the Tattvas. He's Jiva Tattva, Srivasa Pandita. Jiva Tattva, but in one sense, as good as God. He's mentioned along with Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita. In the spiritual world, everything is absolute. And in the consideration of Bhakti, superiority, less superiority, that's also there in terms of social etiquette, but it's a matter of love. Devotees and God are linked very closely by love. Srivasa Pandita, his appearance day, is also the disappearance day of our ISKCON's Sridhar Swami, one of Srila Prabhupada's sannyasis, who departed from this world in Mayapur shortly after Gaur Purnima. The devotees had been with him for the Gaur Purnima festival, devotees from all over the world. Then they all mostly left. I went to see him just a few days before he passed away. Then I wasn't in Mayapur at that time. Now, Srivasa Pandita, I'm talking about, who disappeared. He's a less well-known devotee, but very well-known to the devotees in Burma, where he was born. My contact with him was, I'll tell you, I went to Burma. I was serving under Prabhu Vishnu Swami, who was the regional secretary at the time for Southeast Asia and Bangladesh, parts of Bihar and Nepal. So Southeast Asia, that included, Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. But we were trying to do something in Thailand. Oh, and then Malaysia became added to that afterwards. So anyway, I during the 1980s, I spent considerable time in Bangladesh, and also less, but also considerable time in Thailand. And for those of you who are familiar with the geography, Burma, Myanmar, lies in between Bangladesh and Thailand. So often my service would take me, I'd be a few months in Thailand and a few months in Bangladesh. So often my service would take me back and forth between Thailand and Bangladesh. And what happened, Prabhu Vishnu Swami, he went maybe once to Burma or twice, maybe more, maybe only once. But he asked me to, whenever I'm going from Thailand to Bangladesh, or the other way, or sometimes from Kolkata to Thailand, to stop in Rangoon, because there are flights from Dhaka in Bangladesh to Rangoon, and from Rangoon to Bangkok in Thailand. So I did that, and eventually at one point I counted in my passports, because I went through many passports at that time. I visited there 15 times. We'd get a visa for 1 week, and because it was a military government, they weren't sure how they would receive us. We, which actually meant me, because no one else was going to Burma at that time. There was no ISKCON, no Krishna conscious movement, no initiated devotees there. I would go for a week at a time, and I would go in secular dress, as if I was a tourist. And I used to stay in a crummy so-called guest house for foreigners, foreign tourists, the Garden Guest House in fairly central Rangoon. And we contacted Hindus there. Many Hindus had left after 1947 when India gained independence from British rule, and Burma also at the same time gained independence. So I would go in secular dress, and I would meet Indians who we had some contacts. We didn't find many who were very interested, in Rangoon especially. In Mandalay I went more, and there was more interest there. But practically from the first time I went, there's one Marwari family. I used to take my meals with them. Shiv Kumar was the son, and his father was there. His father must have passed away a long time ago. But anyway, somehow or other, what had happened? He'd got a Back to Godhead magazine, right? And he'd written to Los Angeles. That's it, yeah. That's it. Prabhu Swami sent me to meet him. So I met him. He'd written to Los Angeles and got some information. So he had this contact, the worldwide net of Prabhupada's movement. There's some contact in Burma, someone who's interested. So yeah, then I met him. I don't even remember his name before I took initiation. And he was studying at that time, maybe he was in his mid-teens, I'm not sure. Very quiet, very respectful, didn't say much. But I would speak to him, and I would read to him from Bhagavad Gita as it is. We'd sit and read together. And sometimes he'd ask questions that I'd explain. He really didn't know much about Krishna consciousness, but he was interested. So yeah, I went and I'd meet him every time I came, he'd meet me. And then at some point I didn't see him again, and then he went, I believe, for university studies in Singapore, and then he joined the movement there and became initiated by Gaur Govinda Swami. Then he came back to Burma as a full-time devotee, after getting some training there as a brahmachari. And he really did a lot of work, and that's why he's in Burma. The devotees all know him. He's practically in so many ways that he got the whole thing together. Prabhu Swami was also instrumental. I withdrew at some point because I deliberately relocated when I took sannyas in 1989. I deliberately relocated to India because I wanted to be in a country where it would have some international significance, a major country. So I was out of contact with him, and in those days, when I met him in Rangoon, I couldn't have imagined. He was so quiet and shy, it seemed to me, but he took up the challenge and got books translated, got books printed, got society registered, preached widely, and really under his guidance and his inspiration and his hard work, there are now, I believe, hundreds of initiated devotees in Burma. They're almost all from the Hindu communities, I should say, because there are Nepalis, Tamil, Hindi speakers, Oriya speakers, Bengalis, there's all, some South Indians. I believe, if I remember, his father, what is it? His father Punjabi and his mother Tamil, something like that, or Burmese or something like that. His father was eventually initiated by Prabhu Vishnu Swami, and his sister, because I went to their house. They had a house. Where was that? It must have been in Rangoon also. Was it? My memory is all mixed up. They were from Tongji, I believe. Anyway, his sister, years later, took initiation from me. And I went to their house, and she remembered me. I didn't remember her until much later. And anyway, I needn't speak so much about what he did in Burma and all these things, because the devotees there, who are mostly the ones who are going to be interested in listening to this, they know the history much better than I do. Sometimes I saw him at the Mayapur festival, and he'd spend time talking with me, and some doubts he had about his rhythmic philosophy, and then different things, funny things people were preaching. So I'd speak to him these things. He several times invited me to go to Burma, and in one sense I should have gone, but in another sense I already stretched out. So I thought my policy has been to consolidate the preaching that I've been involved in developing, rather than trying to bite off more than I can chew, spread myself very thinly, although it's hard not to spread yourself more and more. Joto nagaradigram, pritivite ache joto nagaradigram, sabatra pracha hoibe moranam. The holy name, the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, has to be spread to every town and village. There are many places in the world where most people have never even heard of them, let alone consider going and preaching in them. But we have Burma. It's a big country. It's bigger than many European nations, both in area size and population. Thailand, another big country. And there's so many countries, like I say, countries most probably people have never heard of, countries like Laos and Santo Domingo. What else is there? Tunisia. People heard of that because they go on for holidays there. You see the advertisement for holidays. But a lot of people. Of course, many of these countries, the size of them and the population is not much bigger than one district in India, or maybe some small state like Delaware or something in the USA. So they're not so prominent. But still, the preaching has to go on everywhere. And there are many fields to open up. I was just speaking today about a devotee, and we were talking about so many countries, the Arab-speaking world. Our movement doesn't have much foothold there, apart from expatriate Hindus from India and Nepal and Bangladesh, and some of them. But among the Arabic people, we haven't made much inroads. We should do. There's so much to do. All over the world, so many jivas to be delivered. In retrospect, we can see that Srivasa Pandita Prabhu, that Krishna had a plan for him. Krishna had a plan for him means as soon as he had any contact with Krishna consciousness through a Back to Godhead magazine, he was interested. He sent a request for more information to Los Angeles. That was probably, or maybe Swarup was doing that. Swarup Prabhu was doing writing the mails at the time, the secretary. So somehow that information got to Prabhu Vishnu Swami, and it got to me, and then he was interested. And then he would come and meet me. And when I was in Rangoon, which was 3 or 4 days out of the 7 usually that I would spend, he would be with me a lot of the day. He had to study also, but we'd spend time together, hours together. We'd be reading together and chanting together. We have programs we do together, small house programs, temple programs, small. He was immediately interested, and then he came and did so much service, and he went. Krishna had a plan. Krishna took him away early. He's a young man. He must have been, what, in his 40s or something? 40, maybe 50, so I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm blessed. Krishna's so kind. Prabhupada's so kind. I'm blessed to have had the opportunity to be of some service to him and to play a part in Krishna's plan, which unfolded to a large extent through him in the land of Burma, Brahmadesh, the Puranic name, Brahmadesh. Hare Krishna. There's so many devotees all over the world. We don't know who they are. Who knows about Srivasa Pandita? Who knows about his preaching in Burma? They're just quietly, patiently going on with their service, preaching, or maybe pujari work, looking after their mothers, looking after their families, fathers looking after their families. So many unsung heroes all over the world. So I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to glorify at least one of them today. So, Srivasa Pandita, Prabhu Ki Jai. Today is the appearance of Srivasa Pandita, the disappearance of Srivasa Pandita, the disappearance of Sridhar Swami, and the disappearance of so many. Ahani bhutani gachanti hai yamalayam sheshas thavara ichanti kimascharya matav param. Daily, so many people, they go to the abode of Yamaraj. And most amazingly, those who are presently in a body and haven't gone this time round to Yamaraj, they're thinking, I'm not going to go. I'm just going to be here, making plans as if they're going to stay here forever. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Dante nithaya churnakang padayane patya kritva chakar kushatameta ravimi hey sadhava sakala eva vihaya durat Gauranga Chandra Charane Kurutanuraga Parivadatu Jano Yata Tata Va Nanumakarana Vayang Vicharayava Hari Rasamadira Madati Mata Bhuvi Vilutama Nartama Nirvishama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Hare